In the modern production room of the studio in Los Angeles, Shaquille O'Neal adjusts his headphones while the technical team finalizes preparations for another episode of his famous podcast, The Big Podcast with Shaq. At 53 years old, the former center and four-time NBA champion has built an impressive media empire after his retirement from the courts, the studio decorated with memorabilia from his illustrious career. From trophies to gigantic sneakers, serves as a silent witness to his successful transition from athlete to businessman and media personality. On this particularly busy day in March, Shaq arrives earlier than usual. His expression reveals the accumulated fatigue of a week filled with business commitments, recordings for TNT Sports, and meetings with his management team, his executive producer, Marcus. Immediately notices that something is different. "I didn't see you press the subscribe button on our channel. It will only take you a second, and leave your opinion in the comments." "Everything all right, Big?" asks Marcus, using the familiar nickname. "Just thinking about some things," responds Shaq with a solemnity that contrasts with his usual extroverted behavior. In truth, O'Neal has been internally struggling with questions about his legacy. Recently, a series of criticisms on social media accused him of being excessively harsh with centers of the current NBA generation. In his commentary as an analyst, some fans and players argue that he is stuck in an outdated vision of the game, unable to appreciate the versatile talents that define modern basketball. This has bothered him more than he publicly admitted. As the team prepares the set, Shaq reviews the episode notes. The main theme would be redefining legacy, a discussion about how athletes are remembered after their careers. The irony doesn't escape him. At the top of the guest list was Rex Chapman, former NBA player and current social media personality with whom Shaq would share stories about the pressures of staying relevant in an industry that constantly seeks the next big sensation. "We're ready for a special segment today," comments Rachel, the podcast's content coordinator. "The production team has obtained some surprise messages from current players reacting to your recent analysis." Shaq forces a smile, but internally feels apprehensive in decades in the spotlight. He has developed armor against criticism, but recently questions about his own relevance have begun to penetrate that armor. He thinks about his children, especially Sharif, who is trying to build his own basketball career, and how his public criticisms of other players might reflect on them. Before entering the studio, Shaq checks his phone one last time. A message from his former coach, Phil Jackson, appears on the screen. "Remember, being big isn't just about height. It's about how you elevate others." The message, seemingly disconnected, appears strangely prophetic for the day ahead. The producer counts down on air in 5:43, the last numbers being counted silently with fingers. The studio lights intensify. The theme music begins to play, and Shaq's deep voice assumes its familiar professional tone. "Welcome to another episode of The Big Podcast. I'm your host, Shaquille O'Neal, and today we're going to talk about legacy. What O'Neal doesn't know is that this episode is about to redefine his own legacy in ways he never imagined." The podcast begins with the usual rhythm, light jokes between Shaq and his co-hosts, discussions about recent NBA games, and a detailed analysis of the Golden State Warriors' performance in the current season. Rex Chapman shares behind-the-scenes stories from the pre-social media era of the NBA, drawing genuine laughter from Shaq. The chemistry between them flows naturally, with Chapman showing respect for O'Neal's legacy, while subtly challenging him on some of his more conservative opinions. "Let's be honest, Shaq," says Chapman, leaning forward. "The game has changed. You dominated your era with physical strength, but today's centers need to be more versatile. How do you see this evolution?" The studio momentarily tenses. It's precisely the type of question that has recently provoked defensive responses from Shaq. However, today, something is different. Instead of resorting to his usual argument about the true big men of the NBA, O'Neal takes a reflective pause. "Maybe I've been too hard," Hefe admits, surprising even his production team. "When you've been the most dominant, it's hard to accept that the game moves forward without you. It's like seeing someone remodel your house after you've moved out. You want them to preserve something of what you built." Chapman, perceiving the rare vulnerability, deepens the conversation, leading Shaq to talk about his insecurities as a commentator in the modern era of basketball, territory rarely explored by the ever-confident O'Neal. In the second half of the program, Rachel signals to the producer, indicating it's time for the surprise segment. Shaq, relaxed after the honest conversation with Chapman, isn't prepared for what comes next. "We have some reactions to your recent comments," Shaq announces Rachel. "First, we'll hear from someone you've been particularly critical of in recent seasons." The studio lights dim, then brighten, revealing a familiar face on the screen: Stephen Curry, point guard for the Golden State Warriors and a multiple-time NBA MVP. Shaquille O'Neal shifts in his seat, a trace of tension settling in. His history with Curry is complicated. While Shaq has never denied Curry's incredible talent, he's often voiced skepticism about teams built around smaller guards and long-range shooting, questioning whether that style can truly endure. At times, he's even downplayed Curry's legacy in contrast to the dominance of traditional big men. "Hey Shaq," Curry says with his signature easygoing smile. "You probably think I'm here to defend my game, or to say you just don't get modern basketball." He chuckles, but then his tone softens, becoming more sincere. "Actually, I came to say thank you for something you might not even remember." The screen shifts to old footage, grainy but powerful. A younger Shaq is seen walking the Davidson College campus. Curry, still a wiry college player with something to prove, is wrapping up a practice session. In the video, Shaq stops to chat with him. A quick exchange, a moment frozen in time. "Back in 2009, before I was, well, me, you came to Davidson for an event," Curry continues. "I was just this skinny prospect most people thought wouldn't make it in the league." He pauses. The moment hangs in the air. "But you said something I never forgot. Don't let anyone define your greatness by your size. Greatness is doing things no one else can replicate." Shaq's face shifts, the wall of media bravado faltering as the memory surfaces. Chapman and Rachel glance at each other, sensing they're witnessing something rare, unscripted, and real. "That meant everything," Curry says. "Coming from the most physically dominant player the game's ever seen. Telling a skinny kid to forget the limitations. I never had the chance to properly thank you for that." Curry's video continues, taking an even more personal tone. The camera zooms in on his face, evidencing a sincerity rarely seen in carefully produced media interactions. "Shaq, I know we have different views on how the game should be played. You represent an era where dominating the paint was everything, and I represent a shift to the perimeter," says Curry. "But I want to share something few people know. Curry reveals that during his formative years, he compulsively watched tapes of O'Neal's games, not just for basketball moves, but for mindset. Everyone sees your highlights demolishing rims, but what I studied was your mindset, how you handled fame as a kid from Newark, how you transformed criticism into fuel, how you refused to be defined solely by your height or strength. The camera captures the subtle transformation on Shaq's face, the slight tremor at the corner of his mouth, the growing shine in his eyes. Chapman, beside him, senses the moment and remains respectfully silent. "I built my career being underestimated," continues Curry. "Always too short, too skinny, too dependent on shooting. And on bad nights when nothing was falling and critics said I was just a one-dimensional player. I remembered that advice you gave me at Davidson." Curry then shares an even more intimate detail, revealing that after winning his first MVP award, he sent a text message to O'Neal thanking him for that conversation at Davidson, but suspected the message was never received or was lost among the countless messages a celebrity like Shaq receives daily. "I never mentioned this publicly because some lessons are too personal to share," explains Curry. "But when I heard you were questioning your own impact on the modern game, I felt I needed to say this. Your legacy isn't just about rings or statistics. It's about those small moments when you elevated others." When no one was watching, the camera then reveals that Curry is sitting in his locker room, still in his training uniform. He leans forward as if speaking directly to Shaq, not to a camera. "Commentators will debate whether my era is better than yours, or whether my style validates or invalidates your dominance. But what they'll never know is that without that moment of generosity from you, perhaps I wouldn't have had the conviction to redefine what a point guard can be in the NBA." At this moment, the studio camera captures the first tear rolling down Shaquille O'Neal's face, a man known for his larger-than-life personality and humor, rarely seen in moments of such raw emotional vulnerability. So when you question your place in this new NBA, or feel disconnected from the modern game, remember, you planted seeds you didn't even know existed, concludes Curry. And that big fella is a type of greatness no record or statistic can measure. The video ends, leaving the studio in a palpable silence. The production team, usually busy with signals and technical instructions, remains motionless. Rex Chapman places a hand on Shaq's shoulder, who now openly wipes away tears with his fist. I didn't know." Shaq finally breaks the silence, his voice laden with emotion. "I never received that message, never knew." Rachel, sensing the depth of the moment, signals to the producer to take an unplanned break. "Let's take a quick pause," she says softly, as the cameras continue capturing the NBA giant. In one of his most heartfelt and authentic moments ever captured, Shaquille O'Neal's emotional reaction, aired just hours earlier, spreads rapidly across social media. Hashtags such as Laksh, Shaq Tears, and Curry Shaq Moment quickly rise to the top of global trends. What started as a typical podcast episode soon evolves into a full-blown cultural event. Within the first 24 hours, the clip garners millions of views. Sports networks devote entire segments not just to the emotional weight for Shaq himself, but to what it symbolizes for basketball and the broader world of professional sports. In an era when scripted rivalries and drama often overshadow the game, the raw honesty from a legend like Shaq feels deeply refreshing. It was one of those rare instances when the facade athletes usually maintain just completely dropped, remarks an ESPN host. We saw the person behind the icon. Meanwhile, after practice in the Warriors' locker room, reporters swarm Steph Curry, pressing him for insight into the message that moved Shaq so deeply. Remaining humble, Curry deflects the attention. "I just spoke the truth," he replies simply. "We all have mentors who don't always realize the difference they've made. I just felt it was time Shaq heard what he meant to me." 2 weeks later, Shaquille O'Neal walks into the TNT Sports Building in Atlanta, carrying a different kind of energy. It's his first appearance on Inside the NBA since that now famous exchange with Curry. He embraces Charles Barkley, Kenny Smith, and Ernie Johnson with warmth and intention, longtime colleagues and friends who've stood beside him for years on screen. "We're live in 5, calls out the stage manager. As the broadcast begins, fans tune in expecting the usual banter and jokes among the crew. Instead, they find a visibly transformed Shaquille O'Neal, who begins the program with a reflection. "I spent 20 years playing professional basketball and another 10 talking about it," he says, while his program colleagues listen attentively. "And only now am I realizing that perhaps I've spent too much time worried about defending my era instead of celebrating how the game has evolved." Barkley, normally quick with a joke, remains respectfully silent as O'Neal continues. "That message from Steph made me realize that our legacy isn't just what we do when everyone is watching. It's also those small moments when we elevate someone without expecting anything in return." After the program in his hotel in Atlanta, Shaq receives a call. It's Stephen Curry suggesting a personal meeting for a conversation away from the cameras. They set a date for the following week, when the Warriors will play against the Atlanta Hawks on the agreed day at a private restaurant in downtown Atlanta. 2 generations of basketball meet, not as rivals or representatives of different eras of the sport, but as men who share common experiences despite their fundamental differences. "I never imagined that conversation at Davidson had meant so much," confesses Shaq as they share the meal. Curry smiles. "Sometimes the right words at the right time are all we need. You gave me that." The conversation flows to new territories, potential collaborations on charity projects, a series of basketball clinics for underprivileged youth, and even the possibility of a television special where legends from different eras of basketball could share similar stories of mentorship and unexpected connections. At the end of the evening, the 2 stars leave the restaurant and are inevitably photographed by some fans. The images showing Shaquille O'Neal with his arm around Stephen Curry's shoulders, both in a moment of genuine laughter, quickly go viral, a potent symbol of how respect can transcend differences in style, era, and approach to the game. "You know," says Shaq as they say goodbye, "perhaps true greatness is recognizing greatness in others, even when it presents itself in ways we never imagined." Curry extends his hand. The 7'1" giant and the 6'2" guard shake hands, a simple gesture that symbolizes the bridge between distinct eras of American basketball, united by mutual respect and the shared understanding of what it means to leave a true legacy.